Reborn, along a seemingly ambiguous parallel line, writing a life that is completely different from the past. While pushing his father's career to a height that needs to be looked up to, while seeking astonishing wealth in the surging sea of commerce, and most importantly, the once unreachable enemy has gradually been trampled underfoot by himself, that once could only peep at her back, but she smiled lightly at herself as she looked back, wandering between power and wealth, watching opportunities change people's hearts, the treacherous officialdom. How can Wen Liang turn the tide? 2013, Rebirth with Love. Keywords of the novel. Parallel lines of Rebirth without pop-ups, complete collection download of Parallel Lines of Rebirth TXT, latest chapter reading of Parallel Lines of Rebirth. Chapter 1 That Night. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Kid, today's beating has given you a long memory. If you dare to offend Ji-Su again in the future, I will break your leg. Do you understand? Wen Liang only felt a pain on his face. He opened his eyes in a daze and saw a very handsome face. His eyebrows flew diagonally into his temples, his high nose bridge, and his thin lips tightly pursed together. His black and bright eyes shone brightly under the dim yellow street lamp. This face seems a bit familiar, although his expression is trying to pretend to be mature. The soft facial shape and immature voice indicate that he is just a child. Who is he? Wen Liang moved slightly, and a sharp pain came from his calves, lower abdomen, and chest. In an instant, it spread like an electric shock along the tail of his spine, straight into the most sensitive cerebral cortex. Rao is a 20-year-old Wen Liang who started practicing Taekwondo very early. His mind has been honed with unwavering determination, and he has been groaning in pain, feeling weak and sore all over. What's going on here? Memories flashed through my mind like a movie, with Tanyu, Dao Guan, Su Yao, her yellow skirt, swaying figure, and the charming scene of her legs spinning together. By the way, after work, I went to the Taekwondo gym near the company with my close friend Tanyu for daily exercise. The high school beauty classmate Su Yao, whom I hadn't seen for almost 10 years and happened to meet again last year, came to challenge me for the 4th time after 3 defeats. During the competition, the two of them slipped under their feet, and in the end, only the sharp and beautiful back spin kick of Su Yao's beautiful eyebrows was etched in their minds. Wen Liang smiled bitterly in his heart. This beautiful girl was also too fierce. Everyone just joked a few words verbally, and they were going to fight these few battles to the death. This time I stumbled and was not laughed to death by Tanyu's livestock pop. Suddenly, a big slap was slapped on his face, and a strand of blood flowed from Wen Liang's mouth. The childish voice just now viciously said, "Damn it, are you still laughing? What about Grandpa farting?" Wen Liang finally regained consciousness. The person in front of him was not Tanyu. He turned his head and looked around, suddenly stunned. A narrow street appeared in front of me, and not far away were 2.5-person tall piles of construction waste, with occasional foul odors blowing in the breeze. The surroundings were quiet, with only a mottled street lamp above emitting a faint light. Wen Liang was stunned for a moment, and got another kick in his stomach. The person who hit him this time was a handsome boy next to him. He was tall and big, with fluffy and messy hair, and a thick beard on his lips, but his face was equally immature. Gu Wenyuan, why waste so much time talking to him? Disagree. Defeat him. Gu Wenyuan. This name has not been heard by Wen Liang for many years. More than a decade ago, Wen Liang was far from being as versatile and skilled in dancing with long sleeves as he is now. He is thin, weak, and has a bit of a boy-like inferiority complex. His grades are average in the class, and he doesn't look ugly or handsome. He doesn't have any special skills or characteristics, is not outstanding, and doesn't cause trouble. This kind of person, in layman's terms, is called a common face. In more profound terms, even if I have a swollen face, I cannot be considered fat. They belong to the otaku faction where others see me as air and I see everyone smiling. Wen Liang looked up at the two of them, then at himself, and finally his face changed color. A slender body, weak arms, a dusty checkered short-sleeved shirt and a pair of dark green thin pants, with a pair of double-star sports shoes costing over 10 yuan on their feet. What's going on? The tall man still had to take action, but Gu Wenyuan reached out to block it and whispered, "All right, this kid hasn't said a word. Don't be fooled by the beating. His father is also a cadre in the city at least, but look at that unproductive look. Huh, even the beating dirted our hands. Let's go." Gu Wenyuan turned around and left, looking disdainfully at Wen Liang, who was curled up in a ball. He spat and frothed in disgust, and then left. All of this, Wen Liang didn't react, just stared blankly around, motionless. For a long time. Wen Liang struggled to get up while enduring the pain and sat back on the lamp post. After a long time, he murmured, So I'm back in the past. More than a decade ago, Wen Liang graduated from junior high school, and on the day he received his high school notice, he was overjoyed and ran into Ji Su at the classroom door with a crunchy fruit peel. He was so lucky that a big popsicle happened to stick in front of his beautiful classmate's chest. The defense of summer clothes is like the belt of 21st century women, fragile and insignificant. Coupled with the piercing laughter of classmates at work, Ji Su felt both embarrassed and angry. She slapped Wen Liang and ran away crying. Unexpectedly, things were not over yet. That night, a male classmate named Zhou Xiaochang, who had a normal friendship with his classmates, invited him out to play. However, he didn't expect to be deceived into this small alley and beaten up by Gu Wenyuan and Mu Shanshan. Mushin Mountain, it's hard to imagine that tall, rough, and unkempt person with such a cute name. The humiliation of this day and night deeply hurt the poor self-esteem of a 16-year-old boy. After 3 years of high school and 4 years of college, Wen Liang became even more timid, and his personality became strange and solitary. Apart from Tan Yu, he had almost no friends. If it weren't for encountering a kind girl named Lu Yan after work, Wen Liang's life could have been almost destroyed. Lu Yan spent 3 years completely transforming Wen Liang, to the extent that her former classmate Su Yao, such a girl with lofty expectations, inexplicably fell in love with Wen Liang after reuniting. You know, if a beautiful woman is willing to trouble you, it means she is interested in you. Otherwise, do you think she has more free time to use for fighting? Wen Liang certainly understood this, but he already had Lu Yan, so he could only politely refuse Su Yao. However, he did not want to be retaliated by others for his life. He insisted on beating him up in the arena, which was considered a shameless disaster. Thinking of these past events, Wen Liang finally calmed down his heartbeat and slowly wiped away the bloodstain from the corner of his lips. In his previous life, Gu Wenyuan walked far ahead of him. First, he graduated from high school and was admitted to Tsinghua University. Later, he returned to the provincial capital city and joined the National Development and Reform Commission. At the age of less than 30, he had already reached the deputy department level and was one of the best among his peers. He was even more approachable and unattainable. Even though he has put in 12 times the effort, he cannot match Gu Wenyuan's good background. Qingzhou Gu Shitong is the richest man in Jiangdong province. Wen Liang slowly stood up while supporting the lamp post. A meteor streaked across the starry sky, and the dark night was split in half by this light. However, in an instant, it closed again, just like this life that seemed black and white, upside down and chaotic. Since the heavens have given me a chance to do it again, regardless of right or wrong, in this life, I only seek to be carefree and happy. Starting Point Chinese website, 16,977 mini-games updated daily for fun, waiting for you to discover. Chapter 2. At this time. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The summer night breeze, with its annoying stuffiness, penetrates into the chest through the mouth and nose, making people feel oppressed from the skin to the bone marrow. Wen Liang supported the wall and slowly walked out of the alley, looking at the suddenly clear road in front of him. He let out a long breath. Although the area where he was beaten still hurts, it is still within tolerable range. At this time, Wen Liang is naturally much more resilient than a 16-year-old boy. He uses his thumb, index finger, and middle finger to press the wound in a fan-shaped shape, sometimes with 3 or 5 parts of force, doing clockwise and counterclockwise massages. In no time, the pain is reduced a bit. This is a middle-aged teacher he met at a Taoist temple in Beijing after graduating from university, who taught him a method that has a miraculous effect on reducing swelling and removing stasis. Later, Wen Liang found out that this middle-aged man came from a family of martial arts, but in order to make a living, he had to attend classes at a taekwondo gym. This is also something that cannot be done. The learning conditions of Nijiaquan are strict, and the results are extremely slow. Without years of perseverance, it is impossible to achieve success in learning. Wen Liang has been studying with the teacher for over a year and has only gained a superficial understanding. He hasn't really learned much kung fu, but he is very proficient in using some practical techniques. Standing on the streets of Qingzhou in 1995, looking at everything in front of him, Wen Liang still couldn't believe it. Low buildings, dilapidated streets, white ceramic tile walls still shining in the night, without the bustle of bright lights in later generations, without the noise of busy traffic, 2 rows of tall wudong trees gave a hoarse whisper in the night wind, and occasionally a few bare-chested lords walked past with a green beer, and the little sister who stood under the street lamp at the roadside suddenly gave a wild laugh. Qingzhou is still so beautiful. Silently identifying the direction, Wen Liang walked towards home. At this moment, his father should be sitting on the sofa, holding the latest documents to study domestic policy trends. He was the deputy director of the Policy Research Office of the Municipal Party Committee, ranking last in the party group and still facing exclusion. His position at home was imaginable, and his mother was willing to scold him while watching TV, saying that he should go to the boss's place more often. Thinking of his parents, Wen Liang smiled slightly, and his unsteady steps became a bit brisk. Turning a few small alleys and passing through Dongjie Hatong, I suddenly saw a black Santana parked on the side of the road. A woman in a black dress bent down on the back hood and vomited, with her long flowing hair hanging by her ears. Her exquisitely crafted uniform wrapped her figure in a delicate and translucent shape, and a pair of slender, white, and tender *** tightly intertwined under her skirt, creating a stunning contrast to the high and round ball. Wen Liang whistled quietly and walked past the woman. She lowered her head and couldn't see her appearance, but she shouldn't be over 30 years old. At this moment, a young man walked out from another small alley more than 10 meters ahead. He was 1.7 meters tall, with military green shorts, flip-flops, and a white vest draped over his shoulder. He held a cigarette in his mouth and kept his favorite, Yimian too. The 1995 release of The Ancient Puzzler in the Jianghu. After being broadcasted through the mountainous video halls in mainland China, it caused a huge sensation. It is said that people on Qingzhou Road also formed groups to watch, greatly consolidating their combat and centripetal forces. Wen Liang didn't want to cause trouble, and now his small body doesn't have the ability to cause trouble. This road is not the main road, and there are no more pedestrians. He lowered his head slightly, passed by the young man, put his right hand in his pants pocket, and touched the only 5 yuan in his heart, ready to be extorted. Strangely enough, the young man walked over without stopping, without even looking at him. What surprised Wen Liang even more was that he felt the young man seeming to be trembling nervously. Nervous. There is a widely circulated rhyme in Qingzhou. During the day, people look like dogs, with men stealing and women prostitutes behind their backs. The old man is the king of Qingzhou, and the little thug is the cockroach at night. It's an insult to the profession of thugs if they don't carry out their work in the right time, place, and people. Wen Liang couldn't resist his curiosity and turned his head to take a look. With his ruthless gaze honed by later generations, he immediately noticed that the young man's walking was very stiff, even with a few turns. Wen Liang walked a little over 20 meters in confusion, and his face suddenly changed color. He finally remembered that a sensational case had occurred tonight, right here. Zui Yushi, the youngest deputy department-level cadre in Qingzhou and deputy director of the Municipal Education Bureau, was caught on the spot by a social youth while returning home from a reception banquet. Later, a group of people passed by and reported to the police. Against the backdrop of Zuiyu Creek, this case could have been compressed to a minimal extent. The reason why it was so popular at the time was said to be because there happened to be an amateur photographer among the passers-by who took a few photos. Later, the photos became strong evidence of the police's conviction. Later, the photos were circulated through unknown channels, and the clarity was surprisingly high as a result. It can be imagined that rumors were rampant overnight in Qingzhou, with various versions circulating among government agencies and the public. Zui Yushi resigned from his administrative position, later left the education system, and ultimately died without withstanding the pressure. And that *** offender also committed suicide in fear of guilt in the detention center. In the previous life, Wen Liang was young and inexperienced. How could he pay attention to social news? I can remember this purely because my father warned him not to go out at night the next day. After learning about the situation, he found out that on the same night, several streets apart, there was a woman who suffered a more cruel humiliation than him. He was only stripped of the self-esteem of a little boy, while that person was deprived of the right to survive. Wen Liang stopped and clenched his fist fiercely. The 16-year-old's thin and weak body had no sense of full strength, and it was undoubtedly wishful thinking to stop a professional from crawling and rolling in the market. Alarm. In the era without a phone, a mobile phone, and even a 201 recharge card, alerting was truly a technical task. Wen Liang has lived in Qingzhou for 20 years and has never troubled the police. He doesn't even know where the nearest police station is. Looking for someone. The whole road, except for myself, the woman, and the young man, is only filled with stars above my head and reflections under the lamp. I really don't know where the passers-by mentioned in the newspaper are. If Wen Liang hadn't just been reborn and felt a bit disoriented, he wouldn't have gone through Dongjie Hutong. A deep exclamation came from behind, and Wen Liang suddenly turned around. He saw a pair of beautiful long legs kicking beside the car, and two shallow marks on his high heels on the ground, disappearing from the boy's gaze. There is a narrow dead end. Wen Liang finally made up his mind and looked around. There was indeed a pile of construction waste not far ahead. Wen Liang has some understanding of this. In 1995, during the early stages of urban renovation in Qingzhou, some construction companies secretly loaded construction waste into small pickup trucks or tricycles at night to save costs, and dumped it in a remote area of the city. Often, when residents leave early in the morning, they find piles of cement ash, brick shavings, broken steel bars, and other garbage piled up near their doorstep or nearby, almost like small advertisements, becoming psoriasis in Qingzhou. There are also two piles of such garbage mountains in the alley where Gu Wenyuan and Mu Shanshan reached Wen Liang just now. Later, the Qingzhou Municipal Party Committee in government ordered 5 functional departments to jointly govern for a long time, and it was not until 1996 that there was a slight improvement. Now, in Wen Liang's eyes, these garbage were like a thief's egg knife. Without hesitation, he quickly ran over and picked 2 half-meter-long steel bars from inside. He held them tightly and turned back. Tonight in my previous life, I lost my future, while you lost your brilliant and dazzling life. At this moment in this life, I have the right to write about the future, so let me give you the glory you should have. Reading novels to the climax, 16,977 mini-games are updated daily and fun, waiting for you to discover. Chapter 3. Killing people like grass without listening to the sound. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Zui Yushi was almost on the verge of despair. Today, the foundation of the new office building of Qingzhou No. 1 Middle School was laid. Mayor Zhou Yuanting, who took office in March, Vice Mayor Lu Sheng, Secretary General of the Municipal Government Huang Wei, Director of Education Li Dinghua, and school leaders attended the ribbon-cutting ceremony. After the meeting, the principal of No. 1 Middle School invited all leaders to have a working meal at fucking building. Cui Yushi was unwilling to participate, but couldn't resist Li Dinghua's repeated requests. She had to come over to accompany the leader for dinner. At this sensitive moment, she couldn't and dared not be as free as she used to be. After the March National People's Congress, my father, Cui Jing, was transferred from the secretary of the Qingzhou Municipal Party Committee to the secretary of the Linyang Municipal Party Committee, completing a difficult transition from the main hall to the deputy province. During this period, various forces were intertwined, and several major factions competed with each other, engaging in a life-and-death battle, which was heart-wrenching. Especially Cui Jing's archenemy, the strongest candidate for the top position of Linyang and the former city mayor of Qingzhou, Chang Mingtang, was unable to take a step back after the competition failed. Not only did Linyang fall into obscurity, but even the previously weak secretary of the Qingzhou Municipal Party Committee was lost and directly rushed to become the director of the National People's Congress. Although Cui Jing was at odds with Fang Mingtang, he didn't want to kill them all. After all, this would ruin Fang Mingtang's future, and the two of them could be considered to have formed a deadly feud. The officialdom was originally a public tool, and forming such a never-ending enemy would not be worth the loss for Cui Jing. At this stage of the matter, how many personnel are entangled in it has long been beyond the control of Cui Jing alone. Therefore, as the saying goes, people go to tea to cool down, especially in places like the officialdom, where people feel warm and cold overnight. Although Linyang is the largest city in Jiangdong province, except for the provincial capital Guanshan City, and Cui Jing's rank has reached the level of deputy province, this visit quickly reduced its influence on Qingzhou to the lowest. If Cui Yushi still goes his own way, it not only indicates that he is extremely immature in politics, but also finds himself embarrassed. Everything at the banquet fully illustrates the problem. Cui Yushi is a famous, 3-cup cadre, in Qingzhou, 1 cup to the leader, 1 cup to the organizer, and 1 cup to all colleagues. This has been the case for several years. Not to mention that Li Dinghua always helps her block the wine, even Zhou Yuanting often says that we treat each other equally in work, but we should protect female comrades at the table and drink less. Zhou Yuanting was previously the executive vice mayor in charge of education, and Cui Yushi had many opportunities to interact with him. Today, it has become different. Although on the surface, everyone is still as enthusiastic as before. Zhou Yuanting smiled and talked to her about work matters, asking if there were any difficulties. However, Cui Yushi knew that the former friendly and caring vice mayor Zhou had disappeared. Instead, he was replaced by the loyal mayor of Qingzhou and Fang Mingtang, the absolute power owner of Qingzhou in fact. Zhou Yuanting. Several city government officials began toasting, and Li Dinghua habitually stood up to help block the wine for Cui Yushi. However, he didn't notice that Mayor Zhou was turning his head to talk to Lu Sheng, not looking at Cui Yushi with a smile as usual, as if he didn't even notice the actions of his subordinates. Li Dinghua's heart thumped for a moment, and he found an excuse to use the toilet and slipped out. When he returned, Cui Yushi had already drunk a bit too much. Li Dinghua sneered coldly and said, "Without my support, why are you pretending to be aloof?" With a subordinate like Cui Yushi, Director Li was also a bit angry and pleased to have a direct connection with Cui Jing. However, Miss Cui's temper always made him feel nauseous like he swallowed a fly. Now that Qingzhou has changed its weather, although he won't fall into trouble, it's also a pleasure to see the always proud left beauty wither. It wasn't until the banquet ended that Zhou Yuanting seemed to notice that Cui Yushi had drunk too much and cursed the few words that made him drink, but it didn't end. Unexpectedly, something like that happened on Cui Yushi's way home. Cui Yushi felt that her strength was about to run out, with a vest filled with a sour smell in her mouth. Even if she shouted to break her throat, she could only make a whimpering sound. The person on her body was tearing at her clothes with increasing force, and she could even hear heavy breathing. Although Zhuyi was uninhabited, after all, he had made a boyfriend in college and knew what the heavy breathing meant. 2 lines of tears quietly flowed down, and a feeling of despair filled his body. She is already desperate. Suddenly, the man let out a scream, flipped over and fell to the ground. Before Zhuyi could react, he saw a little boy holding up something in his hand and fiercely hitting the man's knee, followed by a kick in his lower body. The man who almost took away everything from her didn't even let out a second scream before fainting in pain. Zhuyi stared blankly at all of this, the impact of great sadness to great joy stirring back and forth in her heart. A great surprise of resurrection from death twisted her stunning face. She looked at the little boy incredulously. Was this her angel? Wen Liang let out a light breath. As soon as he arrived at the alley, he saw the little thug pouncing on Zhuyi, crazily tearing at his clothes. He immediately moved over lightly and used all his strength to hit his waist as he stood up to untie his belt. That is where the essence and energy of the human body converge. Once hit hard, he will immediately lose his combat power. Wen Liang is still worried and follows him to hit the opponent's knee with another stick. Without a comminuted fracture, this kid will not be able to get up again. As for the final kick, it was purely a venting of anger. The 3 behaviors that Wen Liang has always disliked the most are forcing women to engage in exo behavior, ranking first. Are you okay? Wen Liang bent down and gazed at this fateful seductive woman. Yes, seductive. The roadside lights faintly shone in, and the long black hair, as black as satin, accentuated the pure white as jade face. Under the slender and lightly swept eyebrows, there were a pair of big eyes, painted like ink. With a gentle movement, there seemed to be ripples of water rippling in. Zhuyi raised his head slightly, tears diluted the rosy cheeks, and charming lips slightly opened, crying like a tearful expression. The black shirt was torn open, revealing the white and plump lump on the chest. The deep grooves were clearly visible along the falling buttons. Wen Liang sighed slightly, took off his short sleeves and draped them over the woman's body, saying softly, "Get up first, it's okay, it's okay." Zhuyi only felt a pair of black and bright eyes staring at him, and a distant and deep voice came from his ear, like a light of fire lit up in the cold winter, warm, reassuring, and with a hint of supernatural charm. Until many years later, when I think of this night, what deeply lingers in Zhuyu's heart will always be those warm and jade-like eyes and the enchanting tenderness. Zhuyi has been immersed in officialdom for many years at least. If there were anything else, he would not be at a loss like now. After all, tonight's experience is the most terrifying for any woman. Isothermal Liang put on her clothes, and Zhuyi had regained his composure. He stood up and stared at Wen Liang's young and green face, whispering, "Thank you." Wen Liang shook his head and pointed to the fainting thug. "No need to thank him. What will he do?" Zhuyi didn't even glance at the thug, tidied up his clothes, and pulled Wen Liang's hand close to the car. He opened the car window and took out a phone. Upon a glance, Wen Liang noticed that the silver-gray Ericsson GH337, a newly launched G** phone in January, weighs only 220 grams and is the terminator of the generation of Tianjiao's Big Brother. At this point, it can be considered a true symbol of status. Is it 110? I am. Don't. Wen Liang snatched away his phone and saw Zhuyi's surprised expression. Only then did he realize that he was out of place. Zhuyi has just gone through some torture, so he must be very sensitive. Don't misunderstand yourself for seeking wealth. Hurriedly handed over the phone that had already hung up and apologized. I'm sorry, don't be afraid, I didn't mean anything. Zhuyi chuckled as she spoke, and she generously touched Wen Liang's head. Her eyes were all gentle, and her tone was very sincere. How could I be afraid? You saved me, you are my benefactor. I was just surprised why I couldn't call the police. Perhaps it was the sudden appearance of Wen Liang in despair just now, perhaps it was his fierce expression when he hit someone, or perhaps the strong contrast between Wen Liang's thin body and his determination when he started, all of which made Zhuyi feel inexplicable warmth in his heart. It seemed that the two had known each other for a long time, without suspicion, and could be trusted and relied on. Women are always emotional, especially after experiencing great difficulties. Wen Liang felt the sincerity of the beautiful woman and helped her to the end if she wanted to. "Sister, after all, you are a girl," he turned around and pointed behind him. "It's better not to report such a thing to the police. If you spread it out. Smart people are quick to understand." Zhuyi let out a "yeah" and gratefully hugged Wen Liang, saying, "I'm a bit confused." "Brother, you're so smart." "Yes, you can't call the police." "Definitely not." Zhuyi repeated it and almost instantly broke out in a cold sweat. Perhaps some girls can report to the police, as they haven't really been harmed, but for her, they can't. Not only because she is a member of the officialdom, but also because she has a high-ranking father. If you report to the police, you can understand with your toes. This matter will definitely be exposed, and it will definitely become very different from the facts. There are too many people with intentions in this officialdom. Not to mention how many enemies the father has made this time, and how many people are waiting to see his jokes. Once someone maliciously slandered this matter, my father would lose face and prestige in Lingyang. As soon as he thought about it, Zhuyi hugged Wen Liang's subordinates tightly and his consciousness tightened. Wen Liang's short sleeves draped over the beautiful woman, ***'s upper body tightly pressed against the soft chest of Zhuyi. Through the thin clothes, one could almost feel the slight protrusions, and a faint fragrance came from the nose, refreshing the heart. Saving someone during leisure time seems like a good idea. Wen Liang lay on the shoulder of Zhuyi, grinning. Releasing the little boy in his arms, Zhuyi raised his hand and brushed the hair in his ear. His face suddenly turned cold, and his gaze filled with hatred scanned the depths of the alley. He walked to the side and pressed a number, saying, "Is Lao Jiu?" "Well, in the middle of Dongjie Hutong. A dead alley with a few people." "Yes. He's useless." Wen Liang was startled and quickly walked away a few steps to show that he had not heard anything. He couldn't help but feel that what was more terrifying than offending a beautiful woman was offending a beautiful woman in the officialdom. While feeling emotional, there was also a bit of confusion. Zhuyu's delicate appearance, I didn't expect that the means were not bad, but the people in the officialdom were so reckless, isn't it too flamboyant? Later, Wen Liang realized that this was the so-called Qingzhou style. Seeing Zhuyi's calm demeanor after making the phone call, Wen Liang opened his mouth and swallowed what he wanted to say. Although Zhuyi's retaliation was justified, it still made him secretly wary. What are the people in the officialdom? Killing like grass without hearing a sound. With this understanding, Wen Liang hesitated a bit and didn't know if he should tell Zhuyi his opinion. Because he believes that tonight's incident is a conspiracy. Reading novels to the climax, 16,977 mini-games are updated daily and fun, waiting for you to discover. Chapter 4. Wave Goodbye. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Although Wen Liang doesn't know the background of Zhuyi, seeing that she can get to the position of Deputy Director of the Education Bureau at a young age, having no one behind her is definitely not enough. But in the previous life, Zhuyi was still forced to perish, and the person who offended must have been very powerful, and the one who died was still a never-ending grudge. That little thug clearly didn't mean to pass by chance, but came prepared to rush towards Zhuyi Creek, otherwise he wouldn't have been nervous enough to stiffen his body. And the so-called passers-by, how could someone so coincidentally take a photo of Zhuyi being raped, and then so coincidentally spread it? Wen Liang had already noticed the front and back of Dongjie Hutong, and there was not a single ghost shadow. Although every coincidence is a book, too many coincidences that come together are inevitable in chance. If it were to say that there was no one behind it, he wouldn't believe it even if he were killed. What can be considered now is whether or not to warn Zhuyi, or whether she will believe her words. Wen Liang has no knowledge of the strength of both sides, and if he gets involved recklessly, it may set him on fire. After pondering for a moment, Wen Liang decided not to speak for now. After tonight's encounter, Zhuyi will naturally be even more careful in his actions. Her opponent wants to find another opportunity to take action, but it's unclear whether he will wait until the monkey year and horse month, or take a look before making a decision. Sister, since you're okay, I'll leave first. It's too late and I'll go home quickly. Wen Liang turned around and was about to leave. Zhuyi grabbed him and couldn't help but say, "Are you going home like this?" Wen Liang looked down at his upper body and couldn't help but laugh. Short sleeves were given to Zhuyi, and after being pinned to the ground and beaten by Gu Wenyuan for a while, his hair was messy. His pants were covered in mud stains and footprints, and his sweat was mixed with dust, making him look like a mud monkey. Wen Liang smiled bitterly and said, "It's really a shame that you have the courage. I'm afraid I'm not much better than that person, and even more like a bad person." Zhuyi touched his hair, her slender fingers brushing over his scalp, and a faint drunkenness quietly rose from her heart. She pursed her lips and smiled, showing even more charm. "Let's go, sister's house is not far from here. I'll help you wash your clothes and dry them for a few minutes before you can wear them. Or you can also take a shower and see how dirty you are all over." Wen Liang has been a person of 2 generations, with a sharp eye comparable to a military satellite. You can tell from the expression on Zhuyi that she is a bit hesitant. Actually, it can be understood that although Wen Liang is thin and small, he is also a 16-year-old boy. Before Zhuyi passed by, he naturally hesitated a bit about taking a man home. Wen Liang smiled and patted his chest with an okay gesture. "I grew up in a free range, and if I didn't behave like this, I wouldn't even go home. Mom has gotten used to it long ago, it's okay. You should hurry up and drive away, I'll leave." After finishing speaking, he turned around and walked away, waving his hand gracefully towards the back. Zhuyi couldn't help but feel guilty for his hesitation just now. He was still a child, and didn't he act like that just to save himself? But I am wary of him, he is so smart that I must have felt it. Thinking of this, Zhuyi quickly looked up. The long alley was deserted, where could there be the figure of a young man? At this moment, she realized that she didn't even know the name of the lifesaver. 10 minutes after driving away in Zhuyu's car, 2 bread trucks roared over and came to a stop at the spot where Santana had just parked. A group of burly men got off the car and rushed into a dead end, dragging out the unconscious little thug and throwing him into the car to take away. Wen Liang pushed open the door, and the small 3-bedroom room seemed to have remained unchanged. It had simple and elegant white tiles, warm and soft bright yellow chandeliers, a marble dining table sandwiched between the kitchen and living room partitions, and Dad was still sitting on the sofa flipping through boring policy documents. When he heard the sound of the door being pushed, he didn't even lift his head. Wen Liang understands that his somewhat cowardly personality has always been disliked by his father. In his previous life, he often fought with his father because he was disciplined too harshly. Anyway, neither father nor son liked each other. It wasn't until Wen Liang started working that their relationship became easier. But that's also good. It's perfect to sneak into the room and change into clothes. I was quietly moving towards the bedroom when suddenly I heard the father's majestic voice behind him said, "Wen Liang." Lifting his left foot high, he immediately froze in mid-air like time had stopped. Wen Liang turned around with a bitter face, and his father, Wen Huaiming, sat upright on the sofa with a serious expression on his face. "I think you should explain. What's going on with your shirt?" "I'm sorry, a man should dare to take it seriously. Don't always take chances and try to get by. Say, what happened outside?" If we were to replace it with Wen Liang before his rebirth, we would definitely have a strong aversion to Wen Huaiming's way of speaking. We would either resist this issue, remain silent, or resist and talk back, resulting in the old being more angry and the young being more annoyed. Now Wen Liang knows that in fact, old Wen hopes he can cause some trouble in his heart, not always look timid and timid. So when it comes to dealing with parent-child relationships, he will adopt the third approach. Nonsense. Dad, I didn't cause any trouble. I was cooling off in a small park outside just now and accidentally fell asleep. When I woke up, I didn't know which unscrupulous ghost had taken my short-sleeved shirt away. The public security in Qingzhou is also too poor, and your political research office doesn't care about these things. Why don't you do a research project, Dad? These words were mixed up and used as an attack, leaving old Wen stunned. He had never heard his son talk to him like this before. However, the public security in Qingzhou is indeed too poor. You can even lose your clothes while taking a cool ride. With so many people outside in the summer, I wonder how much you have to lose in a night. Using this as a topic for discussion is naturally a joke, but it's still possible to mention it when meeting Director Meng tomorrow. In the blink of an eye, Wen Huaiming's thoughts had been successfully diverted by Wen Liang. Seeing his son covered in dirt, he didn't feel so angry, but he still warned, although you did well in the middle school entrance exam and with your usual grades, you were able to get into the first year of junior high school. Dad knows that you have been working hard in the past 6 months. However, this is only the first step of the long march, and there is still a long way to go. When you enter high school, you are already a big child. You need to focus, guard against arrogance and impatience, and get into a good university. I know, Wen Liang threw himself onto the armrest of the sofa, resting his hand on old Wen's shoulder and jokingly saying, getting into a good university is the only way to have a good future. Dad, don't worry, I understand. I will work hard to study and strive to become your leader within 20 years, Wen Huaiming chuckled and immediately turned his face around, snorting. Wen Liang shook his hand carelessly and walked towards his room, singing, I want this day. I can't cover my eyes anymore. Heh, I want this place. I can't bury my heart anymore. Heh. Wen Huaiming stared blankly at Wen Liang's back, a strange emotion surging in his heart. The Wen Liang in front of him seemed familiar and unfamiliar, but this feeling was really good. Reading novels to the climax, 16,977 mini-games are updated daily and fun, waiting for you to discover. Chapter 5. Betrayal has nothing to do with friendship. You are listening at novelfull.audio. At night, Wen Liang had a dream in which he seemed to become a time and space traveler, traveling through 29 years of ordinary life time and time again. He stumbled as a baby, hissed at the age of 2, entered school at the age of 7, was young at the age of 11, lived a humiliating night at the age of 16, until the low point of high school and the silence of university. Memories flashed through his dreams, and he sometimes felt sad, sometimes laughed, and sometimes poked his head out of the tunnel of time, telling his dejected self that year. Laugh well, kid, the future is in your hands. When I woke up in the morning, there was a wet trace beside the pillow towel. Wen Liang smiled and patted his face. No future. Wen Liang hurried to take the deep-fried dough sticks and asked, don't go to work today. It's nearly 8 o'clock. Ding Mei worked as a cashier at the municipal agricultural machinery factory, but the unit's performance has been poor in recent years and it has caught up with the reform of state-owned enterprises. Recently, people have been feeling anxious. Those who have some connections are all running around, while those who have nothing to do are petitioning and connecting. It is said that in just 1 month, Comrade Zhang Chongqing, the director of the agricultural machinery factory, was forced to have his blood pressure skyrocketed by 180 and was hospitalized for rest. What class are you still in? The factory director has collapsed. I think this factory will turn yellow sooner or later. Ding Mei was angry when she mentioned the agricultural machinery factory. She graduated from high school and had a low level of education. In her early years, Wen Huaiming was still an ordinary small clerk, so she naturally didn't have the ability to run a good unit for her. Although she went up in rank later, she kept working in the cold government office and never held any real power. Zhang Chongqing still gave face and let Ding Mei become a cashier. At least it's also a state-owned enterprise, isn't it? Time has passed and that's how it has come. I don't want the country to vigorously promote the reform of the state-owned system since last year, like a heavy bomb dropped on a calm water surface, from the whole society to the Wen Liang family, all flying and chaotic. If it turns yellow, it's not a big deal. Wen Liang knew that the agricultural machinery factory could not survive next year. After the factory went bankrupt and settled, many problems arose, but they were all forcibly suppressed by the city. Wen Huaiming lacked sufficient strength and was unable to find a good place for Ding Mei in the secondary employment of state-owned enterprises. In a fit of anger, Ding Mei opened a clothing store with compensation money, and the business was good. Although he did not achieve great wealth and prosperity, his salary was much stronger than that of an agricultural machinery factory. No big deal. Ding Mei's eyes glared fiercely. What do you know, you big kid? Who will pay your mother when the factory collapses? With your father's lack of prospects, the whole family has already starved to death. This is the truth. Her salary is indeed much higher than Wen Huaiming's, and there is also a lot of money involved. Wen Liang rolled his eyes and was speechless. He simply ignored her, killed 3 deep-fried dough sticks and 2 bowls of soybean milk quickly, patted his stomach and went out with the plastic bag he had prepared. The plastic bag contains a small fruit knife and a nylon rope. Today, he is going to teach Zhou Xiaochang a lesson, which is the culprit who cheated him out on the phone last night and was humiliated by Gu Wenyuan. Wen Liang doesn't have many friends in the class, but Zhou Xiaochang is one of them. His father is an ordinary employee of the city's first food company. He is tall and generous, usually righteous and willing to fight against injustice. Like Mu Shanshan, he can be said to be the 2 bullies in the school. However, one is known as Zhou Daxia, and the other is Mu Xiaoxiao. When Wen Liang was bullied by his classmates, Zhou Xiaochang often helped him talk. Wen Liang always regarded him as a good friend, but never expected that Zhou Xiaochang, who looked all chivalrous, would betray him. So there is a saying that goes, "What can hurt you is what you love, and what can betray you is what you believe in." This was completely different from Gu Wenyuan. That night, every sarcastic remark, every proud gesture, and even every mocking and disdainful expression from Gu Wenyuan deeply hurt Wen Liang's self-esteem. He hates Gu Wenyuan, but there is nothing he can do. He has tried to stomp on Gu Wenyuan more than once, but always raises his foot to realize that even if he jumps up, he cannot touch the steps that others are standing on. This is an unreachable helplessness, and the deepening inferiority complex that comes with helplessness. But this helplessness and inferiority will only make him feel angry, but not sad. But for Zhou Xiaochang, young Wen Liang felt extremely sad. After the incident, he didn't even have the courage to ask Zhou Xiaochang why he helped Gu Wenyuan bully him. Afterwards, the 2 went to different schools in high school and never met again. For him in his past life, the betrayal of friends was another heavy blow to make matters worse. But since there is a chance to start over, no matter who makes a mistake, they will have to pay a price. Arriving downstairs from the family of the food company, Wen Liang bought a bottle of soda from a roadside convenience store and sat under the eaves to drink. Based on his understanding of Zhou Xiaochang, this guy is definitely going to the workers' stadium for ice skating today, and he also used this as an excuse to schedule himself last night. It's not yet 9 o'clock, so I shouldn't have gone out. Sure enough, before finishing a bottle of soda, I saw Zhou Xiaochang swaying out of the door in red short-sleeved black shorts. Wen Liang put down the bottle and kept a distance of 1 or 2 meters behind him. After turning a few streets, Zhou Xiaochang climbed a small path along the small park and saw no one around. Wen Liang quickened his pace and rushed over, lifting a foot and kicking it on his back. Zhou Xiaochang stumbled a few steps and fell to the ground. Wen Liang stepped forward and kicked *** again, then flipped him over and hit his nose bridge with a punch on his body. Although Wen Liang's current physique is not good, compared to Zhou Xiaochang, it is even more like heaven and earth. But he knows how to fight under the covers. His waist, eyes, and nose bridge are the dead end of street fights, especially when dealing with young people like Zhou Xiaochang. It's a perfect match. 2 rows of blood flowed down his nostrils, and Zhou Xiaochang screamed in pain. Tears flew out of him, not because he had let down the hero's reputation, but mainly because his nose was connected to the tear gland, and whoever suffered would suffer. Seeing that he had lost his fighting spirit, Wen Liang took out a nylon rope and skillfully tied a knot behind his hands. He kicked *** and sneered, "Get up, let your buddies appreciate the traitor's face. Are you still so handsome and extraordinary?" Zhou Xiaochang has a very good figure, half a head taller than Wen Liang. Although his appearance is not as handsome as Gu Wenyuan's, compared to Wen Liang's popular face, it is the difference between an iPhone and a Big Brother. So when the two of them are together, Zhou Xiaochang always puts his arm around Wen Liang's shoulder and says, "Come and admire your brother's face, isn't he still so handsome and extraordinary?" At this moment, hearing these words again, even though Zhou Xiaochang's tears were streaming down his face in pain, he couldn't help but feel a bit lost in an instant. He sat on the ground and didn't shout anymore. After a while, he lifted his head and whispered, "I'm sorry. Really, I can't afford to provoke Gu Wenyuan. Sorry." Wen Liang suddenly felt amused. He was mainly trying to scare today, but in fact, it has been more than 10 years. Based on his nearly 30 years of life experience, Zhou Xiaochang's betrayal is so small that it is not worth mentioning, and he has long ignored it. However, after returning last night, I suddenly remembered that I was so weak that I didn't dare to come and question Zhou Xiaochang. I felt a great sense of disdain for myself, and in order to make up for my regret, I prepared props such as a fruit knife and nylon rope, intending to give him a good scare. But when the situation came to an end, Wen Liang felt that it was too boring to handle. He had been using it for more than a decade but couldn't find a chance to retaliate against Gu Wenyuan. He was reborn and came to trouble Zhou Xiaochang first, which was also a kind of weakness to some extent. A weakness that bullies the weak and fears the hard. Taking out a fruit knife and inserting it into the ground, Zhou Xiaochang's face turned pale with fear. Wen Liang didn't want to play any more and raised his hand to slap him. 5 fingerprints immediately appeared on the boy's fair and tender face. "Zhou, this slap represents the end of our grudges and friendship. I'm giving you this fruit knife. Originally, I wanted to use it to make a hole in you, but now it seems unnecessary. I hope in the future, when you're going to betray a friend, take a look at this knife and it will tell you what to do. Gu Wenyuan, wait, I will also tell you how to be a person." Wen Liang left for a while before Zhou Xiaochang got up from the ground. He betrayed his friends. Although there was a fear of Gu Wenyuan, there was also a hidden meaning deep in his heart that he didn't even want to uncover. That is, he feels that with his timid and cowardly nature, betraying him once would not be a big problem. Does he dare to promote it or even trouble himself? But today's Wen Liang completely destroyed his previous cognition, decisive, calm, and even with a hint of coldness and ferocity. If I had known he would have had such a big reaction, would I still have made that phone call? He cut the rope with a fruit knife, put the broken rope and knife into his pocket, patted the ash on the ***, and slowly walked home. I still make phone calls because he can't afford to provoke Gu Wenyuan. This answer has dampened Zhou Xiaochang's enthusiasm. Reading novels to the climax, 16,977 mini-games are updated daily and fun, waiting for you to discover. Chapter 6. The Intersection of Past and Future. You are listening at novelfull.audio. After stirring up the grudges and grievances of a 16-year-old boy, Wen Liang devoted great enthusiasm to physical exercise. Although I encountered a master of Nejia fist in my previous life, I was already in my 20s or 60s after graduating from university. My skeleton and body had already been fixed, and I had worked hard with my master for a year. However, I achieved almost no results. Although this master exchanged 2 roasted chickens for several meals, the cost-effectiveness was still extremely low. Master once regretfully said that if he could start practicing from the age of 15 or 16, he would definitely achieve some success in 10 years. Nowadays, entertainment is still the main focus. Wen Liang's words brought tears to his face. Now that he has the opportunity, Wen Liang naturally doesn't want to miss it. He doesn't have many dreams of being a martial arts master, and he knows that fists can't solve problems. But if he can avoid the humiliation of that night from happening again on the basis of exercising his body, why not do it? Wen Liang followed his master's instructions in his memory and made a detailed schedule. He would wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning, run for an hour, do half an hour of horse steps, then lower his waist and split his legs, and practice boxing for another hour. Considering that Nejia boxing was too slow to take effect, he would also practice taekwondo every afternoon. This thing looked like flower boxing embroidered legs, but it was enough for ordinary people. These things were already very familiar to Wen Liang in his past life, but now his physical fitness is too poor to perform many movements, so there is a process of gradually exercising and becoming familiar with them. Based on this intensity, Wen Liang estimates that within 2 months of summer vacation, he should be able to bid farewell to the appearance of bean sprouts. Although he is not as fierce as Mu Shanshan, at least standing in front of Gu Wenyuan, he will no longer appear so thin and sleazy. Perhaps this can bring us closer to each other. Thinking of this, Wen Liang was suddenly surprised and realized that the shadow left by Gu Wenyuan had been deeply imprinted in his heart, even though it had traveled through time and space and gone through more than a decade. It had never dissipated or weakened. Wen Liang's family lives in the 7th family building of the Municipal Party Committee, which has an average layout and location. The only advantage is that there is a small sports field on the west side of the family courtyard, with a small track, basketball court, single and parallel bars, and a rectangular sand pool. The official said it was dug at the request of a leader who loves triple jumping. There are many leaders who enjoy sports, but they like such a niche sport. Even 16-year-old Wen Liang doesn't believe it. And the roadside society's statement is more reliable. A certain leader looked at feng shui and said that if he had nothing to do, he would jump and his official position would be promoted by 3 levels. The fact proves that the leader was deceived. After digging the sand pit for a short time, the leader dismounted and dealt with the situation. This place has become a playground for children to play house in the courtyard. Wen Liang found 6 bamboo poles, inserted them into the 6 corners of the pool to form a circle, and then bought 6 bells to hang on top. Standing in the center position, he kicked them in front, back, side, hanging back, and asterisk. The standard was to exercise the sensitivity, coordination, and control of the body just in time without touching the bells. As for the strength and intensity, he has the inner martial arts skills, so there is no need to kick the inch board anymore. On the first day, Wen Liang ran for an hour and immediately fell to the ground exhausted. After resting for a long time, he could barely stand on his horse's feet. In the afternoon, not only did he do any movements, but he even managed to kick his legs with one hand. Any coordination and control became a joke, and the bell rang non-stop, giving off a somewhat chaotic aura in the wind. When she returned home at night, Ding Mei, who had always been indifferent and careless, surprisingly pulled her son's head and measured the temperature, asking for warmth and comfort for a long time. She worried and asked, "It's okay, son. Several neighbors told me today that your family is worried. You are usually an honest child, but you have been kicking and bouncing around on the small playground all day. Don't let anything happen." Wen Liang rolled his eyes and waved his hand, collapsing on the bed. He said angrily, "Mom, adding an egg to breakfast tomorrow won't keep up with the nutrition. No matter how good the movements are." Ding Mei was stunned and didn't know what to say. After such a month, Wen Liang persevered without any obstacles, with extraordinary perseverance. His originally waxen face was tanned black, exuding a healthy taste. His soft and gentle face was a bit calm and resolute, and when viewed from the side, it was no longer childlike innocence. His black eyes sank deeply, reflecting the reflection of the entire world, seeming profound and mysterious. His body is slightly taller, although he doesn't have bulging muscles to enrich his appearance. His broad shoulders and long legs make his entire body moderately slender. Wen Liang was still the same boy as 10 years ago, but he became more calm and composed. Wen Liang is still the same man as 10 years later, but he has a bit more youthful and frivolous. At this moment, he felt more like he had fused his two selves together, without distinguishing between them. At noon on that day, in the scorching sun, Wen Liang still persisted in kicking in the sand pool. The bell on the bamboo pole had already been replaced with a wooden board that was about inches thick. Only one side of the board was tied to the pole, making it unable to withstand force. When he reached a deep level of skill, he could use force and speed to directly kick it in half. Wen Liang is still unable to grasp the moment to exert force, often only able to kick the wooden board high and unable to break it. Just as I finished my homework, I suddenly heard a pleasant voice coming from beside me. "What are you practicing?" "Martial arts." Wen Liang turned her head and saw a girl in a white dress standing not far away. Her long black hair was tied in a ponytail shape, and her bright eyes were shrouded in a layer of mist. With a slight blink, there was a clear and visible flow of light. Her skin color is very white, her nose is straight, and although her melon seed face may not be considered extremely beautiful, it carries a hint of heroism in its softness. It was the hottest time of the day, but the place where the girl stood seemed to be refreshing with the gentle breeze. "Oh, this is actually not martial arts, it's dance." The girl in white chuckled lightly, with a hint of disdain in her eyes. "Really? Are you trying to use this kind of dance to save the beauty of heroes?" Wen Liang was taken aback by the girl's directness. In this era, it is rare for girls to actively approach someone and delve into this level of theme when speaking up. It is true that people cannot judge their appearance, and cups must be measured with their hands. Strangely enough, why does this sentence sound so familiar to me? Wen Liang raised his hand and placed it on his forehead, carefully examining the girl. It seemed like he had seen her somewhere before, and he seemed to have no impression. After hesitating for a while, he gave up. Perhaps in the hearts of every man, beautiful women should be like this. Do you want to use this kind of dance to save heroes and beauty? How could this be so familiar? Seeing Wen Liang staring foolishly at herself, the girl didn't get angry either. She took a few steps forward with a hint of sarcasm in her tone. "I know that boys your age all have a martial arts dream, hoping that one day they can sing with swords and uphold justice, and maybe even have a beautiful confidante. I had no intention of hurting your little boy's dream," but as she lifted her skirt and jumped down, her white and tender legs flashed before her, and the summer air became even hotter. Just like this, inserting a few bamboo poles, hanging a few wooden boards, and jumping back and forth like a frog, you can practice unparalleled martial arts. Did you make any progress? The girl reached out her slender fingers and pinched the wooden board, swaying lightly twice. Her expression was very serious, so serious that you would think she was talking about a very sacred thing, but her tone was full of teasing, satire, and disdainful ridicule. Coupled with the faint smile on her beautiful face, if Wen Liang were really a 16-year-old boy, he would go crazy at this moment. "Well, you make a lot of sense, and I think it's quite silly. But like in TV and novels, would it be even more foolish to go jump off a cliff?" Wen Liang's face was dull, and if there was just a little saliva flowing from the corner of his mouth, he would be more like a legendary intellectual disability expert. The girl stared at Wen Liang for a moment, then suddenly raised her hand and lightly patted her forehead. Helplessly, she rolled her eyes. The expert foam fan, who had just worked hard to pretend, collapsed and looked extremely cute. She murmured in her mouth, "I was wrong. I should have thought that in the scorching heat of the day, people would still jump and jump with such joy. Apart from those with strong personalities, there are also idiots." Wen Liang almost didn't burst out laughing, and the familiar feeling in his heart grew stronger and stronger. He tentatively asked, from my classmate's tone, "Do you know martial arts or are you a master?" The girl immediately regained her energy upon hearing this, lifted her head slightly, and said arrogantly, "I don't dare to be a master. I'll take care of you like this." She raised one index finger and shook it, "One finger is enough." Wen Liang stood in awe, with the adult uncle's sleazy personality taking the upper hand. He quietly meowed at the girl's skirt. If this beautiful woman had a backspin kick, it would be stunning. He immediately arched his hand and said, "Then let's have a round. Whoever loses will treat her to ice cream." The girl pursed her lips and muttered, "Childish," then said in a very clear voice, 10 ice creams. Deal. The sun above is getting hotter and hotter, just like this naive youth. The two stood side by side in the sandbox, and the girl emphasized the rule one last time. Whoever falls first counts as the loser. Wen Liang nodded dispensably, but he basically ignored this rule. Of course, who pushed who, didn't he still push? There's no need to worry about this kind of thing. Wen Liang raised his hand, took a wrong step, shifted his center of gravity forward and fell, his gaze firmly fixed on the opponent. The girl in white lifted her left foot lightly, pointed her toes to the ground, withdrew her right foot 3 inches back, exerted force on her waist, clenched her fist with her right hand and lifted it to her chest, held her back with her left hand, extended her palm, bent her fingers, and then I secretly caught ****. A flash of lightning flashed through Wen Liang's mind, and the fragments that had disappeared from his memory suddenly pieced together. Before his rebirth, in Beijing, at the Taekwondo gym, the scene of a leg, a turnaround, and a face that looked like anger and anger quietly reappeared in front of him, at this moment, after many light years. Su Yao. The girl was taken aback, and a surprised expression on her face had already told Wen Liang the answer. Su Yao, this is Su Yao from high school. Before you start fighting, you catch ***'s fault. It turns out you've been left behind since childhood. Wen Liang stood still, feeling 1,000 emotions. Reading novels to the climax, 16,977 mini-games are updated daily and fun, waiting for you to discover. Chapter 7. Beautiful and Fierce. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Wen Liang is actually not familiar with Su Yao. In high school, he only heard that there were 3 outstanding girls in Qingyi Middle School. Ji Susu from Class 3, Ning Xiaoning from Class 7, and Su Yao from Class 1. Apart from having a holiday with Ji Susu, the other 2 never even met. At that time, Wen Liang was sitting quietly in his position at school, holding on to martial arts novels at home and never participating in group activities. Of course, no one invited him to participate. 3 years into high school, there is still a female classmate who doesn't know there is such a person in the class, let alone a teacher. Apart from the homeroom teacher, the only one who knows his name is the chemistry teacher. I have to rely on one more experiment class where Wen Liang burned off the chemistry teacher's skirt, making it difficult for others to recognize him. I truly met Su Yao by chance in Beijing many years later. Wen Liang and Tan Yu appeared in Xidan with their backs hooked. Tan Yu, who had a low-mouthed animal, pointed to a small black mole behind his ear in front of him and talked about it. It extended from the fragrant shoulder jade back to the upturned buttocks. When it came to a pair of long legs like sheep fat and white jade, tragedy struck birds. The beautiful woman turned backwards and kicked sideways, leaving a big footprint on Tan Yu's lewd face. This is Su Yao's first impression of Wen Liang, beautiful and fierce. After this chaotic and humorous first meeting, the lives of the 3 gradually intersected. When Su Yao found out that the other was a high school alumnus, she extended her slender and delicate little hand to Wen Liang, with a slight blush on her beautiful face. "Meet me, my name is Su Yao, Su Xian Su, Yao Cheese Yao." Later on, they gradually became acquainted and got to know each other, but in the end, Wen Liang refused Su Yao's love. That beautiful and fierce girl remained fragile in the face of love. Time goes back to more than a decade ago, and the white-clad girl who was preparing for a fight, scratching ***, was stunned and asked in confusion, "How did you know me?" Wen Liang's abusive attitude suddenly changed, and everything in front of him was so wonderful. In his perception, Su Yao was the shrewd and capable urban beauty in an OL uniform more than a decade later, the proud girl who dared to love, hate, and be stubborn and capricious, the elegant woman with all kinds of charm and charm. He never imagined that Su Yao would have this side in front of him. Very naive and cute. Without waiting for Wen Liang to answer, Su Yao seemed to have an answer. He nodded slowly and muttered to himself, "You live here, and there should be someone from the municipal party committee at home. It's not strange to know me. All right, do you still want to fight? A man, will you die if you're happy?" Wen Liang was still in that strange feeling of time and space confusion, not paying attention to the words in front of the little girl. He smiled slightly and said, "Fight, why not fight? Waiting for free ice cream." "Ha!" Su Yao looked up and smiled, with a few strands of green silk gently swaying in front of her delicate forehead. "Be careful, the wind is strong, it's flashing." Before she could finish speaking, she suddenly picked up a ball of sand under her feet and threw it at Wen Liang. She followed her feet with force and rushed forward, reaching out to take it towards Wen Liang's left shoulder. This is a non-legendary grappling hand in the military, which is not on par with popular military martial arts. It emphasizes a fast, accurate, and ruthless style, especially suitable for girls to be small and broad, and to win with the weak over the strong. As long as a joint is held, it will be locked, buckled, twisted, lifted, and peeled. Even if you are as strong as Tyson, you will not be able to exert any force and will be suffocated to death. Wen Liang naturally didn't understand these things, but since he knew that the girl was Su Yao, he had already been wary of her habits. This little girl looks quite honest. She dares to use any shameless trick in a fight, which once made her mind ache. Not panicking at the moment, my left hand was blocking my eyes, my upper body was slightly tilted back, avoiding her. At the same time, I turned around to the side, raised my foot, reached out, and was about to throw her upside down. "Little sample, how did I beat you in 10 years? What else do I have to do today?" Su Yao sneered and forcefully stopped his former servant's movements. He slammed his feet heavily on the ground, causing his center of gravity to shift. He bent his left elbow and slammed it fiercely into Wen Liang's chest. In this fierce attack, he showed his true strength. Wen Liang was startled. "All right, little girl, are you really here? If you hit it this time, not to mention the fracture, it will at least hurt for several days." He stood with his hands interlocked on his chest, and with a loud bang, his forearm was hurt from the impact. As a man, it's okay not to have a woman standing up, but it's not as hard as a woman. Isn't this a great shame? Before he could react, Su Yao grabbed Wen Liang's pulse, twisted it back and forth, clasped his arm behind him, and then gently lifted it upwards to complete the classic police action of catching a thief. He then bent his leg and kicked Wen Liang half kneeling on the ground. It's clear that we need to eliminate everything. Wen Liang felt depressed in his heart. If it weren't for his body's inability to keep up after being reborn, he wouldn't have surrendered in just a few strokes. At least we would have to fight for 300 rounds and then engage in a hand-to-hand combat barebacked. As the saying goes, when a person is about to die, he can pull one at a time. Wen Liang bent his legs and hooked them back onto Su Yao's legs, ignoring the intense pain from the arm twisted behind him when he forcefully turned around. He turned into an upward position, his whole body hanging in the air and wrapped around Su Yao's body. Then, with the help of the rotational force and his own weight, he fiercely bumped his shoulders. Accompanied by the girl's screams, there was no doubt that the two of them fell heavily to the ground. Soft and warm lips are imprinted on the side of the face, with a faint gasp. The fragrance of a fragrant orchid wraps around the nose. The girl's bulging bulge beneath her body, and the graceful curves of Lingling, exude in the thin summer clothes. At that moment, Wen Liang pressed the girl under him, but without the shyness and fantasy of a 16-year-old boy, or the lewdness and lasciviousness of a 30-year-old uncle. What resonated gently in his heart was a faint greeting that came a long time ago but never faded. Meet me, my name is Wen Liang. Warm one, forgiving Liang. Time seemed to freeze at this moment, and Wen Liang playfully stared at Su Yao's face until she woke up from confusion and glared at the moment when she was about to get angry. He stood up and chuckled lightly, "You lost." Su Yao stood up and straightened the hem of her skirt. Although her beautiful face had a slight blush, she didn't get angry because of what happened earlier. She had been training with her brother for many years and never treated herself like a woman when fighting. Today, I was supposed to come find an ant, but I saw a silly boy bravely bouncing and kicking in the pool under the high temperature of 38 degrees Celsius. It was only with a heart movement that I had this chance encounter. Whether this silly kid is deceitful or shameless, after all, she fell to the ground first. If she lost, she would lose. She snorted, patted her skirt with both hands, and said rashly, "I didn't bring any money today. I want to eat ice cream, next time." Wen Liang suppressed his smile and said with serious disdain, "Next time. Don't it be the next life. I mean, losing and defaulting on the debt is not something a lady should do, right? Huh, looking at your small nose, small eyes, and small body, I didn't expect you to be a cautious person." Su Yao had that classic disdainful expression again. "Tomorrow, here, let's fight again. If I lose, I'll treat you to 20 ice creams. If you're going to lose, just lie on the ground and learn how to bark." Wen Liang was shocked and couldn't help but retort, "This bet is too unfair." Well, indeed, 20 ice creams cost 20 yuan, and learning to bark like a dog is not worth a penny. Otherwise, you would crawl 3 laps on the playground while learning to bark like a dog. Watching Su Yao's discussion, Wen Liang lowered his head in pain, and the little girl who was mischievous, causing death and not paying for her life, returned. To be responsible, Su Yao's skills are much stronger than the current Wen Liang, but the girl's strength is still not strong enough. In addition, she did not firmly lock Wen Liang's arm. After all, if that were the case, it might lead to a fracture. To fight, not only be cruel to the enemy, but also to oneself. Su Yao was also scared by the boy's decisiveness and ferocity in that moment, and couldn't help but admire him a bit. He didn't pursue the humiliation of being pressed on by the man. A teenage girl's spring tide is just beginning to move, and then she is fully exposed to the opposite sex like this. No matter how generous she is, she must run away first. Waving his hand to bid farewell to Wen Liang, Su Yaoqiang's suppressed heart thumped as he walked out of the family building. A moving shyness appeared on his face, and he secretly turned around to see that the boy was still foolishly looking at his back. He quietly let out a sigh and walked away. Starting Point Chinese website, 16,977 mini-games updated daily for fun, waiting for you to discover. Chapter 8. Tragic Comedy. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Returning home, Ding Mei was chatting with Wen Huiming in the living room, and her son didn't bother to ask a question when he came back. Wen Liang had a strong sense of being ignored, so he ran to the kitchen to find something to cushion his stomach and sat aside to listen to his parents. If you ask me, Li Xingli is not a man. What's wrong with his wife running away? The more he does this, the more he wants to live a good life and let that dog man and woman take a good look. He knows how to drink and drink all day long, and he'll fall down. Ding Mei looked remorseful, with a look of resentment that made Wen Liang think of the past when he was beaten up for failing exams. When Huaiming looked at the Qingzhou daily and casually said, "Everyone has their own destiny, that's impossible. Victory can't keep an eye on his wife, nor can he blame anyone else. How can I say that for a woman like Zhao Yaqing, Li Xingli shouldn't even marry her?" Ding Mei didn't know what came to her mind. Her eyes turned red and she reached out to wipe the corners of her eyes, saying, "Poor Nuanyuan, what a clever little girl. Now." When Huaiming sighed and said, "Tomorrow you send 200 yuan over. We also have a responsibility for this. We can't just watch people starve to death." Ding Mei nodded, thinking of the beautiful woman who was happy in Shenzhen, and hated her. "I was blind. I thought she was a good sister's, and I helped her to make a matchmaker for Li Xingli. I knew that today." Wen Liang listened for a while and remembered what was going on. Zhao Yaqing, this woman, can be said to be the first woman that Wen Liang fell in love with in his past life. Generally, a timid and somewhat curvaceous little boy, when his sexual consciousness first awakens, often likes young women and mature women who are beautiful in appearance and have a seductive physique. Zhao Yaqing is known as the flower of an agricultural machinery factory. Her figure and appearance are all first-class and attractive, especially her chest is firm, her buttocks are round, and her small waist is plump. When walking, she sways gracefully. Many men in the agricultural machinery factory are drooling at her back. Ding Mei and Zhao Yaqing entered the factory in the same batch, one as a cashier and the other as an accountant. They soon became good sisters. Zhao Yaqing's parents are both farmers from the suburbs and have few friends in Qingzhou. The food in the staff cafeteria is not good, and they often come to Wen Liang's house to grab a meal. The young otaku was quickly captured by this extremely beautiful aunt. On the night of his first nocturnal emission, the woman under him was vaguely Zhao Yaqing's appearance. Li Xingli is a technician in the third workshop. He is honest, does not drink or smoke, looks handsome but never teases the female employees in the factory. He is a famous gentleman in the agricultural machinery factory. After being introduced by Ding Mei, he finally got together with Zhao Yaqing and became a romantic talk for a while. Unfortunately, love is ultimately just a lottery ticket that has won a big prize. After the award period, it's not even worth the paper, and it will make you regret it. In 1993, 50% of the former hooligans in the factory, Zheng Wucheng, returned from the south dressed elegantly and acted boldly. Although he still looked disgusting and sleazy as usual, he was already a legendary tycoon. The people in the factory went to visit Zheng's house in groups, and when they returned, they only said one sentence. "Zheng Wucheng, this hooligan, has become a wealthy man now. This world is really full of courage, starving to death." Speaking of how 50% of it is today, it is still thanks to Zhao Yaqing's gift. Although Zheng Wucheng was a child of an agricultural machinery factory, he was uneducated and inexperienced. After graduating from junior high school, he wandered around the streets and often played pranks on young women in the factory. However, he met Qingpi outside, and everyone lived at home. If he suffered a loss, he would admit it. 50% of the time, when they saw Zhao Yaqing, they were shocked. Several requests for love were sternly rejected by Zhao Yaqing. This guy had a wicked heart, and one night, while Zhao Yaqing was alone returning from Wen Liang's house to the factory, he intended to but was met and saved by passing Li Xingli. Afterwards, Zheng Wucheng repeatedly threatened to trouble Li Xingli, but Ding Meichuao and Huaiming came forward and asked his friends from the police station to punish him several times. Zheng Wucheng finally calmed down, but he also gritted his teeth and went to the south in a deserted area of the agricultural machinery factory. It's hard to imagine that in just a few years, this kid will return home in glory. The agricultural machinery factory has been declining since the early 1990s, and many people are looking for alternative ways out. Li Xingli is also a brave person. In 1992, he resolutely resigned from his iron rice bowl and opened a small restaurant in the sea. His ancestors came from a chef's background, and he has a family secret recipe in cooking. It should have been good, but doing business really depends on his character. In just 1 year, he lost all his hard-earned savings. The people in the factory laughed at him for being foolish, and the iron rice bowl of the public family was not good. Now, it's better, maybe he doesn't even have money to buy underwear for his wife. Various situations came together, and in 1993, 50% of them returned. In just 3 months, Zhao Yaqing abandoned her husband who had been married for 9 years and her 9-year-old daughter, and went to Shenzhen with this former thug and current tycoon who had once wanted to *** him. Love, in the face of reality, has become a joke. Recalling all of this, Wen Liang let out a light sigh. In his past life, he had resented Zhao Yaqing countless times and only felt that the bad women in the world were guilty of it. However, after 2 lifetimes, his thoughts naturally changed. Perhaps it was not this woman who was dirty, but this world. Ding Mei recovered from her self-blame and realized that her son was leaning on the sofa, staring straight out the window. Her black face was filled with sadness that a young man had never experienced before, and her heart trembled. She sat next to him and gently stroked her hair, whispering, "Sorry, what's wrong? I'm not happy at school." Wen Huaiming couldn't bear to see Ding Mei like this the most. His kind mother, Duo Bayer, let out a heavy snort and got up to go to the bedroom. Ding Mei lazily listened to him, holding on to Wen Liang's hand and laughing, "Good son, what's up to you to tell Mom? Is there no change left? Mom will give it to you." "Mom, what happened to Li Xiqing just now? Isn't she good?" Li Xiqing was Li Xingli's daughter, formerly named Li Yi and nicknamed Nuanyuan. After Zhao Yaqing left, Li Xingli changed her name. Alas, when I went to his house today, Li Xingli was still drinking heavily, drunk like a pig, and didn't care about anything at home. Xiqing told me that she hadn't paid the tuition fees for last semester and was about to start middle school. The school informed her that if she couldn't pay the money, she wouldn't come to school anymore. Damn it, the little girl is only 11 years old, wearing clothes that are still 7 or 8 years old, her shirt can't cover her belly button, her pants don't even reach her calves, she's black and thin, and her little hands are all calluses. After Zhao Yaqing left in his past life, the communication between the two families was also cut off. Ding Mei often paid a little money to go there, but Wen Liang never saw the Li family father and daughter again. He himself was still in a tragic self-isolation, where he had no leisure to pay attention to the lives of others. Wen Liang vaguely remembers the cute girl who pulled her clothes and called her brother. Li Xiqing, who perfectly inherited her parents' excellent genes, was a beautiful embryo from a young age. She had big eyes, long eyelashes, and skin that could be blown and broken. Her long ponytail swayed and she smiled with 2 shallow dimples, looking like a little elf. But I didn't expect that she was living so hard now. Mom, if you can help them, just give them a hand. Although Aunt Zhao has left, Xiqing is not wrong after all. Do you still use your words? But your father is not skilled, and I only have such a small salary. How long can I help? Sigh. Wen Liang stood up. It was already dark outside the window, and a few strands of moonlight crawled along the wall into the balcony, casting a few mottled moonlight shadows in one corner. The darker the sky, the brighter the moon. To do it again means to have fewer tragedies, more comedies, less sorrow and anger, and more joy in this world. It's okay, everything will eventually change. Reading novels to the climax, 16,977 mini-games are updated daily and fun, waiting for you to discover. Chapter 9. Warmth. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Lying in bed at night, Wen Liang tossed and turned, unable to sleep. Although Li Xiqing's appearance in his memory had become blurred, he still remembered many years later when Ding Mei suddenly mentioned Li Xiqing and shed many tears. In his past life, Li Xiqing did not go to school after graduating from primary school. He picked up garbage, ate leftover food, sold flowers, cigarettes, alcohol, and even moved bricks to construction sites, struggling to make a living. After growing up, Li Xiqing became even more beautiful and charming than her mother Zhao Yaqing. She worked in society, deceiving everyone. At the age of 15, she followed Scar brother, who was a troublemaker on the street. Scar became involved in a crime and was shot by a wealthy man. Later, the wealthy man's business failed, and Li Xiqing had no choice but to go south alone. After graduating from Wen Liang University, she learned from her mother that the children of an agricultural machinery factory had met Li Xiqing in the south. In the bustling city, what else could a beautiful girl who graduated from elementary school do? The last time I heard about Li Xiqing was that she was caught in the police station during an anti-pornography operation. A sisters from Qingzhou went to protect her and was told that there was no such person. Li Xiqing, 25 years old, disappeared from everyone's sight, perhaps in the world. Ding Mei was grateful for the kindness between the two families, and she had done everything she could to help. She had also wanted to bring Li Xiqing back home more than once, but Li Xiqing was young and never wanted to burden those who were truly good to her. She rarely met Ding Mei and avoided them from afar every time. What is moving is that whether she is picking up garbage and eating leftover rice, or working as a thug and a tycoon, she disappeared from the age of 11 to 20.5. For 15 years, every year during the Spring Festival, the Wen family would receive a fried rice cake. Under the rice cake, there was a piece of paper with crooked handwriting that read, "A good person lives a safe life." Every year when she sees this, Ding Mei silently tears while holding the note. Upon thinking of these, Wen Liang felt that he could no longer hesitate. Most tragedies in the world ultimately stem from the issue of money. As long as there is money, many people's lives can be completely changed. He slammed the edge of the bed and fell asleep in murmurs. The next day when he woke up, for the first time, he didn't go for a run. Wen Liang rode his father's phoenix bike to Li Xiqing's house. The agricultural machinery factory was established in 1985 and cannot be considered a large factory in Qingzhou, which is centered around heavy industry. Compared to the behemoth of Qingzhou Heavy Industry Group, it is not worth mentioning. However, no matter how small the plate of state-owned enterprises is, it is also made of iron. Ding Mei's entry into this factory is entirely due to Wen Huaiming taking off his clothes and working hard. Li Xingli took over his mother's position. The previous retirement succession system stipulated that factory workers could be replaced by a child to become workers after retirement. It has always been a mystery how Zhao Yaqing, a child of an ordinary farmer, entered the agricultural machinery factory. After the expansion of the agricultural machinery factory in 1989, several storefronts were built in a new area outside the factory. After Li Xingli resigned in 1992, the house in the factory could no longer be occupied, so he moved to his parents and rented a storefront with compensation money to open a restaurant. He had a traditional craftsmanship and initially performed well, but within a year, his situation rapidly declined. First, his parents passed away, and his business also declined. Soon after, he lost all his savings. Then, Zhao Yaqing abandoned his husband and daughter, and Li Xingli couldn't bear such a blow anymore. He became addicted to drinking, anesthetizing himself in the world of alcohol every day, and never regained consciousness again. Passing. No one knows how Li Xiqing has survived these 2 years. Li Xingli's parents' home is located in the northern suburbs, far from the city center, and is an exclusive small courtyard with a courtyard. It is not large in size, with 3 bungalows arranged in a row. The Qinghe River flows slowly through the door, reducing the noise of the city and adding a few rare moments of tranquility. Pushing open the partially open door, Wen Liang saw Li Xiqing at a glance. She was sitting on a small wooden stool, her slender body arched, holding an axe that was not much thinner than her arm, struggling to chop the firewood one by one. The yard was empty, with a cold stove piled up in the corner, and a pile of chopped black vegetable leaves placed on the wooden table next to it. At a glance, it was clear that it was wild vegetables picked from outside. A few chicks ran out of the chicken coop in the northwest corner, making a gurgling sound, adding a little vitality to this lifeless courtyard. Upon hearing the sound of the door opening, the little girl lifted her head, her messy hair covering her forehead. There was no trace of blood on her waxy face, and winding blood was faintly visible on her dry lips. Her clear black eyes opened in a round shape, but she could not see the childlike innocence and spirituality that this age should have. Is this still the cute and charming little girl in my impression? Wen Liang sighed quietly and took a few steps before smiling gently. Nuanyuan, do you still recognize your brother? The little girl stood up, her disheveled coarse cloth clothes washed clean, but couldn't hide her shyness and unease. She timidly called out, Brother Wen. Wen Liang stood in front of the girl, looking at the cute girl who had once dressed up like a little princess. He didn't know how to speak for a moment. For Wen Liang, who had become accustomed to speaking fluently since adulthood, this was a unique experience. Li Xiqing lowered her head, holding the axe in one hand and pulling down the corner of her clothes with the other small hand, trying to cover the exposed skin. After a moment of silence, the girl suddenly remembered something and quickly said, Brother Wen, please sit down first, I'll go get you a glass of water. Wen Liang felt a sharp pain in his heart. When did the little girl with fried dough, twists, braids and a princess blouse understand these worldly wisdom? Take the axe out of her hand, gently put it on the ground, and then press her shoulder to let her sit down. Wen Liang squatted in front of the little girl, grabbed her little hand and said softly, It's okay. My brother doesn't drink water. Warm, it's my brother's not good. I haven't seen you for a long time. The child's hands were supposed to be chubby and boneless, but Li Xiqing's hands were thin and bony, causing a slight pain when held. Li Xiqing shook her head and said seriously, Brother, you're very busy going to school. Aunt Ding often comes to see me, and it's already good. Wen Liang's human nature has actually become extremely hard, and even after hearing this sentence, he still cannot remain calm. He spread his arms and gently held the little girl in his arms, stroking her hair and whispered, Nuanyuan, you've suffered. Don't be afraid, everything is over. In the past 2 years, Li Xiqing has suffered a lot of humiliation and hardships. Children have pointed at and scolded her as a childless child. Adults often add that they blame the bad woman, but that bad woman is actually their own mother. How long has it been since someone spoke to themselves in such a tone? Feeling the sincerity and love of Wen Liang, the unfamiliarity that I haven't seen in 2 years instantly disappeared, and the memories of playing together in childhood returned to my mind. Li Xiqing's hands, which had been hanging on her side, slowly lifted up and closed behind Wen Liang's waist. She bit her lower lip tightly, preventing tears from falling from her eyes. Her timid voice was soft but firm. Warm is not bitter, warm is not afraid. My older brother is no longer the annoying person who plays tricks on me all day long, and I am not the warm and affectionate one that everyone loves. However, for some reason, after these 2 years of torture, my cold heart was easily melted by the simple tenderness of Wen Liang. The sound of the door opening rang again, and 2 people in their 40s walked in. One of the men with a Chinese face and a dignified expression didn't even look at Wen Liang and said, Nuan, is your father sober today? I'll sign this agreement as soon as possible. I don't have time to drag it out with you. The other man with a sharp chin and slender eyes continued, Nuanyuan, I heard from your uncle about this. It's actually a good thing. Don't be stubborn, just let your father sign it, and it will save me from coming to beg for alcohol every day. Wen Liang stood up for no reason and looked up and down at the 2 of them. From the moment the 2 of them entered, the little girl remained silent with a cold face, allowing them to speak recklessly without saying a word. Huazi's face became anxious and pointed at Li Xiqing's nose, cursing, if it weren't for your pitiful behavior, you would think I cared about your shabby house. You're really shameless. Dad is an alcoholic, Mom is a bitch, what kind of good guy could you raise? Li Xiqing suddenly encountered a great difficulty, and his mind had already matured. Upon hearing his scolding, his lowered face suddenly lifted up, his hands tightly gripping his clothes, and his whole body trembled slightly. Wen Liang narrowed his eyes and pulled Li Xiqing to his side. He lightly pinched her palm and smiled at his national face, saying, "What do you call this, big brother? I don't know what's causing you so much anger." Guozimian looked at Wen Liang in surprise. He didn't have a good temper with the 16-year-old doll. He waved his big hand irritably and said, "It's none of your business, just stay on the side." The man with a sharp chin saw the situation getting awkward and came out to try to smooth it out, saying, "Move forward, don't be impulsive. What's good to discuss? Let's talk calmly, there's nothing we can't agree on." Guozimian said angrily, "How can we talk about it? I've been saying all the good things I've said. I've been here 7 or 8 times, and finally managed to negotiate and sign the agreement when Li Xingli was sober last time. This little girl came out and made a big fuss. She dropped her pen and didn't even say it. She even tore up the contract. If it weren't for your pitiful behavior, she would have slapped you a long time ago. Damn it, growing up is like your mother, what the hell?" This sentence was spoken to Li Xiqing, with a ferocious and imposing demeanor. Reading novels to the climax, 16,977 mini-games are updated daily and fun, waiting for you to discover. Chapter 9. The warmth is just the heart. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Wen Liang was confused and pulled Li Xiqing aside to ask, only then did he understand the cause and effect of this matter. Li Xiangqian, with a face of 23 characters, is Li Xingli's cousin. The two families have 3 different outfits, and their relationship is neither far nor close. After Li Xingli's parents died, the only property left behind was this small courtyard. Later on, Zhao Yuqing left, and Li Xingli drank excessively. It turned out that an 11-year-old girl was supporting the door frame, which aroused the envy of others. Li Xiangqian is a famous thug who idles around all day and doesn't take his job seriously. However, he looks like a dog and has also fooled many people outside. For some reason, he took a liking to Li Xingli's small courtyard and came several times to buy it. Although Li Xingli was drunk, he was not mentally disabled. This courtyard was the last place for him and his daughter to stand, and once sold, it would be deserted and nowhere to go, so he refused Li Xiangqian. But Li Xiangqian didn't give up and still found a way to get this deal done. With a sharp chin named Yu Chuanzi, Li Xingli opened a nearby grocery store. He lost all his money in business and used the remaining money to buy alcohol. Later, when he ran out of money, he began to owe money. At first, there were 2 or 3 willing to lend him money, but later on, the debt grew more and more, and no one except Yu Chuanzi refused. When Li Xiangqian heard this news, he approached Yu Chuanzi and promised him some benefits, asking him to come to his door to press for debt. When the pressure became urgent, he went to talk to Li Xingli about buying a house, without worrying whether he would agree. These Li Xingli naturally didn't know, but after Li Xiangqian had come a few times, Yu Kawako, who had always been very talkative, suddenly came to urge Zhejiang. All the things that can be sold at home have been sold out, and the only thing left is a white marble jar, which is the tool for cooking secret recipe spices uploaded by Li Jiazu, and was mortgaged to Yu Chuanzi by Li Xingli. Later, when Li Xiangqian was forced to come back, Li Xingli finally let go and agreed to sell the house. Just as he was about to sign, Li Xiqing rushed in and tore the agreement to pieces. At a young age, he even wielded an axe to his neck. If Li Xingli dared to sign the agreement, he would die to see. Of course, it was not signed in the end, and Li Xiangqian was also scared by the little girl's madness. After all, he only wanted to seek money, so he disappeared for a period of time and didn't want to come knocking on him again today. After listening to all of this, Wen Liang still had a calm expression and pulled Li Xiqing back with a smile, saying, "All right, I understand everything now. Nuanyuan is not a sensible child, so don't argue with him. Since Uncle Xingli has agreed. Li Gu showed me the agreement, Nuanyuan will listen to me." Seeing Li Xiangqian's questioning gaze, Li Xiqing nodded. She believed in Wen Liang, just as she had always believed that her mother would come back to explain to her. After reading the agreement, Wen Liang couldn't help but frown. What is bullying people? This is bullying people. What is the shameless extreme? This is the shameless extreme. No matter what else, let's just say that this 3-bedroom, 1-courtyard is only selling for 1,000 yuan. Where is this money grabbing? It's like killing someone, then cutting bones and meat, leaving no residue. Wen Liang smiled and said to Li Xiqing, last time you did the right thing. If you take a closer look at this kind of thing, it will also dirty our eyes. He lifted the agreement high and tore it open in the middle with a swoop, then folded and tore it again. Li Xiqing's waxen face showed a hint of smile, and his brother did not disappoint him. Li Xiangqian suddenly responded with a face full of anger. He raised his finger at Wen Liang and said, "Okay, you little brat. Are you playing with me? Grandpa will beat you to death." Without waiting for him to raise his hand and strike someone, Wen Liang lightning struck and grabbed his outstretched finger, forcefully breaking it downwards. Accompanied by a scream of piercing eardrums, he punched Li Xiangqian in the face, and a light click came from the bridge of his nose. Not to mention a comminuted fracture, a minor contusion was certain. Li Xiqing screamed and covered her mouth, looking at Wen Liang in surprise. Her round eyes were full of admiration. Once upon a time, Brother Wen, whom I had always loved since I was young, was already so amazing. She detested Li Xiangqian so much that she wanted to press him to the ground countless times and beat him hard. Today, it finally came true. Li Xiangqian covered his face and fell to the ground, tears and nosebleeds splattering everywhere. The painful cries were almost unbearable to hear suddenly. Wen Liang picked up an axe and walked towards him with a sneer. Yukawako opened a shop just to welcome and send people around. Although he is not very ordinary, his eyes are poisonous. Originally, Wen Liang was young and spoke with a gentle temperament, thinking he was just an ordinary child. Now he realizes that he has taken his eyes off him. Although he has been in society for many years, he only interacts with some low-level petty people. When have he ever seen a young person who is so ruthless at a word of disagreement? Scared, he immediately waved his hand wildly and said, "Don't. Don't. It's easy to discuss things. It's easy to discuss things. Brother, calm down first, calm down." His person was rooted on the ground, afraid that Wen Liang might misunderstand his actions. Wen Liang lazily ignored him and stepped on Li Xiangqian's face. The axe fell in front of him with a thud, and the sharp blade of the axe brushed against the bridge of his nose, flashing past. Li Xiangqian was so frightened that even his screams came to an abrupt end. He held his breath for fear of angering Wen Liang. I'll just say that once, Wen Liang recalled the villainous style of speaking in the movie and said eerily, "Get away from here, don't let me see you here, otherwise I can't guarantee where the axe will strike." Li Xiangqian nodded desperately, he could almost feel the sharp aura on the boy's body. Wen Liang smiled. A thug who only bullies the weak, don't expect him to have much courage. This level of intimidation should be enough. After dealing with Li Xiangqian, Wen Liang pulled the axe and walked towards Yu Chuanzi. Yu Chuanzi froze on the spot, his legs trembling with the sound of the axe rubbing against the ground. He had a flattering smile on his face and bent down a long way. "Brother, you know, I was purely forced by Li Xiangqian. The victories were all loose drinks, not worth a few dollars, I just came to take a look, nothing else." As Wen Liang approached, Yu Chuanzi's mouth began to stutter. Wen Liang stopped in front of him, his smiling face making people uneasy. He smiled slightly, his bright teeth shining in the sunlight and said, "How much money do you owe you?" 300. Wen Liang furrowed his brow. He owed 300 yuan for a pound of bulk wine, which is still the responsibility of his family. How much wine did Li Xingli drink in the past 2 years? Actually, it's okay to slow down this account for a while, Yu Chuanzi said as Wen Liang frowned and his heart raced. It's been half a year since other families don't credit him for his wine money. I just see him as pitiful. If he doesn't drink for a day, he'll have to live and die. Really, I don't have any other intentions. Li Xiqing walked over and grabbed Wen Liang's hem, whispering, "Uncle Yu is a good person, brother." Wen Liang touched her head and said softly, "Well, since Nuan said he's a good person, my brother won't make things difficult for him." Li Xiqing looked up, her eyes full of happiness that had been affirmed and nurtured, and a shy smile vaguely showed her past cuteness and charm. Wen Liang stared at Yu Chuanzi with a clear mockery in his eyes, saying, "Boss Yu, since Li Xiangqian doesn't buy this courtyard anymore, I'm afraid the promised benefits will also be ruined. Please don't take offense." Yukawako knew that this young man had seen through his fellow countrymen, and it must have been Li Xiangqian who had promised a favor. He used pressure to repay the wine bill to put pressure on Li Xingli, so that he could easily buy the house. He was also shocked in his heart. In addition to being tough, Wen Liang gave him a feeling of unfathomability and sneered, where? Wen Liang thought for a moment and asked Li Xiqing to go to the room and bring out a pen and paper. He quickly wrote a few lines and handed them to Yu Chuanzi. Yukawako took it and saw a promissory note, which read, "I owe Yukawako 500 yuan for wine today, this receipt. Wen Liang." "This is." Wen Liang laughed heartily and said, "Boss Yu is kind and righteous, so naturally I cannot let you suffer losses. I gave you the money owed by Uncle Xingli, but after 2 months, I will give you an additional 200 yuan in interest. Boss Yu, is this business not a loss?" After saying this, he handed over the paper and pen. "Not at a loss, not at a loss," Yoshikawa said with a bitter smile as he put away his IOU. He thought to himself, "I know who you are. If you pat me and leave, where can I go with a IOU to claim the debt?" But now the situation is stronger than humans, and he has no other choice. He took the pen and wrote on paper. "I have paid for the wine with Li Xingli now. This is the evidence, Yu Chuanzi." Wen Liang praised beside him, "Boss Yu has great handwriting." As he looked at his bitter and dripping expression, he smiled and said, "Boss Yu, my father is Wen Huiming from the Municipal Party Committee. He can get information as soon as he asks, and we can double the sales in 2 months. You won't be at a loss on this account. This is also meant for Li Xiangqian on the ground. This little thug, under the name of the Municipal Party Committee, dare not do anything else." Upon hearing from the Municipal Party Committee, Yu Chuanzi put away the note without saying a word. His eyes were sharp, and it was evident that Wen Liang was not lying. He greeted and helped Li Xiangqian, who was still howling on the ground, out of the door. Wen Liang has been a person of 2 generations, and his methods of handling things are very smooth. However, Li Xiangqian, as a relative, has malicious intentions and naturally needs to be punished severely. Although Yu Chuanzi is an accomplice, he only wants a small discount and is willing to credit wine to Li Xingli. Everyone looks up and doesn't look down. Li Xiqing still needs to live here, so he can't be too difficult. Then Wen Liang took on the debt, and whether Yukawa Z believed it or not, he said it again. However, Wen Liang had a thunderous tactic at the forefront, and the debt was still owed. The handling of this matter was reasonable and dignified, and no one could say a word of no. Li Xiqing naturally didn't understand these things. She stood quietly on the side, watching Wen Liang handle everything, with warmth and tears flashing in her eyes. Since Zhao Yaqing left, Li Xingli has been drinking heavily all day and everything has been weighing on Li Xiqing's thin and small body. She has to go to school, cook, pick up junk and sell garbage to pay off alcohol bills, and deal with villains like Li Xiangqian. The little girl has long been overwhelmed. The reason why she can hold on and not fall is the only thought in her heart. To live well until one day she can ask her mother in person why she abandoned her father and herself. You know, without mom's warmth, My hands and feet are always cold. Wen Liang suddenly extended his tongue and made a face, then slapped his chest with great force and said, with my brother around, don't be afraid of Nuanyuan. The little girl chuckled and finally couldn't help but shed tears. She slowly walked forward, burying her head in Wen Liang's arms, listening to the strong heartbeat and smelling the faint scent of him. Li Xiqing knew that she would never forget today in her lifetime, nor this moment, nor a boy standing in front of her. With a gentle and afraid voice blowing away the smoke, she said, with my brother here, don't be afraid of warmth. Li Xiqing shook her head and buried her face deeper, murmuring, don't be afraid of warmth. Reading novels to the climax, 16,977 mini-games are updated daily and fun, waiting for you to discover.